heart problems, like, the father stuff.
So before Christmas, we started to work our way through the Gospel according to St. Mark. We got as far as the end of chapter 4, so this morning we'll pick up where we left off at the beginning of chapter 5, where Jesus behaves as an exorcist. Now, when I wrote that sentence that I just spoke, Jesus behaves as an exorcist, I was fully aware at the time of writing it how out there it would sound. When I wrote it on Tuesday evening, I was sitting in the foyer of the Hockley Valley Ski Resort while my children were boarding. I was sitting typing on my laptop on a rather comfortable leather sofa, the kind none of us can afford. My feet were resting inappropriately, might I say, on an expensive coffee table. There were flat-screen televisions on the wall playing a hockey game I wasn't paying attention to. In the background, bartenders were mixing cocktails, people were checking their smartphones, adults were gossiping with their friends. And in that very pleasant environment, even typing the word exorcist felt profoundly incongruous. In our modern era, the whole idea of evil, of darkness, of demons, of exorcists, and all that, it is something that we would rightly question as a harmful superstition. But we would not question that evil exists. This is Luke Magnotta, born in Scarborough, raised in Lindsay. He went to an Ontarian school, just like you did. Grew up listening to the same music that you listened to, watching the same television programs that you watched, playing the same games that you played. No doubt every morning he drank the same brand of coffee that you drink. In other words, he was any person living on any street in any Canadian city. On the 25th of May 2012, he posted an 11-minute video on bestgore.com, a horrific website. In this video, a naked man was tied to a bed and repeatedly stabbed with an ice pick. Following his slow and brutal death, the victim was then dismembered, after which Mr. Magnotta, the perpetrator of the crime, then committed acts of cannibalism and necrophilia upon the limbless torso of his victim. There is no question that what happened on that ordinary Montreal apartment upon an ordinary May evening was an act of evil. And there is similarly no question that evil exists. We see it everywhere, from the plight of the Rohingya refugees in Burma to the young girl living in fear of her father's nocturnal visits. There is no question as to the reality of evil. However, once we accept that evil exists, we must then inquire as to its cause. Where does it come from? Is it the case that to explain the evils of this world, we need look no further than individual human choices? Take Adolf Eichmann, for example. Eichmann, as you probably know, was an officer in the SS, one of the principal architects of the Holocaust. What that meant in practical terms is that every morning he went to work and figured out how he could most efficiently murder millions of men, women, and children. In the 1960s, Eichmann was captured by Mossad and sent to Israel to stand trial for his crimes. In preparation for this trial, the Israeli government had him examined by several prominent psychiatrists, each of whom found him to be perfectly sane. In fact, they each said he was boringly sane. He was like the old uncle who never had anything to say that you never wanted to speak to at a family party, the dullest man they ever met. Does this then mean that evil requires no further explanation? Is it sufficient to say that evil comes from the things men choose to do? Or does it go deeper than that? Is there something else? Is there such a thing as a pure and a personal evil? An evil that is older than our world and sits coiled in its frigid existence, enduring and undying and a personal hatred? Or is it both? At the very least, we would say and should say that there is more than one way of looking at life and at things and at darkness. So in Mark chapter 5, we read that Jesus and his disciples went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. So at this point in the story, Jesus is a Jewish Bible teacher, and he should not be going across the lake to visit the region of the Gerasenes, because in the ancient world, the region of the Gerasenes is geographically, morally, and religiously a taboo place. This is a place that in its day was well known for pagan beliefs, for occult and taboo practices. In other words, if you're a good Jewish boy, as Jesus seems to be a good Jewish boy, this is one of the dark places of the world that you don't go to. This would be like an Amish kid going to Vegas for a weekend. Someone should make that movie. Then we're told that as soon as he gets to this forbidden place, a man with an evil spirit comes out of the tombs to meet him. So we're already, in the second sentence of this story, where it feels like a script from a cheap Halloween B-movie. I mean, this is straight out of The Living Dead, is it not? A man with an evil spirit comes out of the tombs to meet Jesus. What's going on here? And then we're told further that this man lives among the tombs. So notice the repetition in the sentence of the word tomb. And notice, please, how jarring that word is in the sentence. How can a man live among the dead? What kind of life is this? And when you read this sad detail, do you recognize it? Is this not how you feel when you think about those people in your life that you're worried about? They are alive, but only technically. In many important respects, they're dead. Dead to joy, dead to happiness, dead to pleasure, dead to hope. The saddest funerals I get to take are the ones where the deceased never really lived. They just existed, dead for many years. So here's the main character in the story. He's a living dead person. And then we're told that the reason he lives in this unlivable place was because no one could bind him up anymore, not even with chains. So he's had a fun life. He'd often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. So one of the well-documented characteristics of possession is that it often gives its victims an unusual strength. I think most of you know that some years ago I went to the Vatican and I took their course on exorcism, and one of the things the old priests will tell you there, they all have a story that goes something like this. You know, they'll go, they all smoke, these old guys, I don't know why. They're like, in 1978 there was this girl who came to our church and she was like 100 pounds and she was really thin and she wasn't strong, but man, I'm doing that too much. And then they'll go on to say how this waif of a person with a diminished strength and mental capacity during an exorcism experience somehow displayed this unbelievable strength that required 5 people or something to hold her down. So the background to this episode is that this young man has gone through a long period of mental and physical diminishment. In that transition from being whole to being broken, he has gone from being a social to an antisocial creature. His failing mind and failing health have left him increasingly isolated from family and friends, and in this isolation he has become violent to himself and to others, so much so that his family and friends have gotten to the end of their capacity to hope. They've tried the therapy, they've tried the rehab, they've tried the specialists, they've done everything that they can do, and they can't do any more. So now he's gone. They've done their best. He's on his own, and he's dying. He's hurting himself. He's hurting everyone that comes into contact with him. It's a living death. And then we're told that night and day among the tombs and hills he would cry out, and he would cut himself with stones. According to the Jewish Talmud, this man is now displaying all the characteristics of what was then thought to be a demonic insanity. And there's lots of things I wonder as I read this weird story. I wonder, for example, is there some connection between the fact that he lives among the tombs and the spirits that have possessed him? Is this a ghost thing? Another thing I wonder is that in the episode immediately preceding this one, Jesus and his followers are almost killed in a freak accident. Is there a connection between these two stories? Is there something going on in the paranormal world that tries to get rid of Jesus before he gets to this key important point in his life? Does that happen? I don't know. And another most obvious thing that I notice in the story is that it's profoundly sad. When you read the lamentable details of this young man's life, you immediately drown in the pathos of it. I mean, this young man was once a child in his mother's arms, and seeing her son grow up to harm himself, socially isolated from good family and good friends, exiled to a horrible place of existence, enduring a living death, separated from all love and affection, is more than any parent should have to bear in the life of their child. And here's the thing, my 21st century friend, even if you aren't buying any of this, not a single word of it, this you've seen many times. It's hard, for example, for me to read this story and not think about any number of addictions. Addictions that cause exactly the same things that the phenomena in this story causes. Social isolation, self-harm, and a horribly diminished life. We see these things every day. They're puzzling and perplexing and vexing. Next sentence. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear that you won't torture me." The thing to notice in this sentence is that the evil spirit finds it painful to be around Jesus. And again, if I might step out of the story and into 21st century life, you've probably noticed that as in you have a family member or a friend, and they're deeply into something they shouldn't be into. Deeply. Some addiction, some habit. It's sentenced them to a sad, diminished life. Have you noticed how uncomfortable it is for them to be around family and friends? How uncomfortable it is for them to be around a dinner table, having a normal conversation. We see this all the time, and it's horrible. The reason this particular spirit, we're told, finds it hard to be around Jesus is because he sees Jesus, notice the sentence, as being the Son of the Most High God. Now this is interesting, because in Jewish writings, the phrase Son of the Most High God only ever appears on the lips of non-Jewish speakers, whereby they recognize that the God of Israel is the actual God. So what's happening in this sentence is that the evil within this man is saying, Jesus, I know that you're God, and I know that you're right, and I know that you're good, and I know that you're proper, and knowing all of that, I fear you, and I don't like being around you. It's uncomfortable for me. And then in the next sentence, we discover that this diabolic fear was precipitated by Jesus having said, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Now, to understand this strange story, you have to first of all understand that it comes from the ancient world. And in the ancient world, people were very superstitious. They believed that all manner of spirits and ghosts and demons could cause all sorts of maladies and sicknesses and disasters in life. And because they believed that, exorcism was big business. And these exorcisms were typically very elaborate affairs. For example, there would be spells and chants and sparrings with evil entities, during which the exorcist would try to get rid of whatever it was possessing the victim. This is common to all cultures and religions. In fact, spirit possession is a universal cultural phenomenon. Each culture has its own version of the exorcist, and these are particularly complicated affairs. So in the ancient world, if you thought that you had an evil spirit in your home, for example, you would call the exorcist. He'd come and see you, and after you paid him, he would then place magical charms in the most auspicious parts of your house. He would then unroll expensive scrolls and read from them. And this might go on for weeks or months or even years. And it was all very complicated and very elaborate. It was a dark art. That's how you justified the fee. That's how these people made their money. So the man in this story hasn't only had to endure a diminished life, he's also had to endure all the rigmarole of ancient therapy. His family would have paid for professional exorcists. His family would have spent a fortune on every treatment, on every psychiatrist, on every rehab program, on every counsellor they could get their hands on. And none of it worked, and some of it made it worse. Do you ever feel that about therapy? Paid you $150 an hour and now I'm worse. Should have gone down the pub and talked to my mates. Contrast that with the simplicity of what Jesus says in verse 8. It's curt by comparison. Jesus doesn't do anything complicated. He doesn't spar or cajole with evil. He makes demands of it. He simply says, "Come out, you evil thing." Now stop. Maybe a lot of what is wrong with our lives can be fixed with a simple sentence. Maybe we're all guilty of overthinking everything and making everything far more complicated than everything needs to be. We know that we don't see the world as the world is. We see the world as we perceive it. And if we just change the way we see things, things will be different for us. A switch of mindset can lead to a switch in life. And maybe it's these simple sentences that we can speak to ourselves that can change so much. Look how simple this is. Come out. Stop. Maybe we could say that to ourselves more often. Stop. Maybe I don't have to be so grumpy. Maybe I don't have to be so sad. Maybe I don't have to feel so lonely. Maybe I'm not useless. Maybe if I just change the way I see me and my world, things will change for me. Next sentence. Then Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." Now this is interesting. The word legion, as you know, is Roman military terminology for a fighting regiment of 6,000 men. And what's interesting about this is that by the 1st century, the Roman military machine had been in ascendancy for about 100 years and was at this point the undisputed military power in the world. And so therefore, in Jesus' day, the word legion symbolized the undefeatable military power of what was thought to be an evil regime. And so everybody reading Mark's words in the 1st century would have immediately understood the significance of this name. They would have all known that in 63 BC, Roman legions subjugated Palestine. They would have all known that there was a permanent detachment of these legions in nearby Syria. And they would have all known that the reason those legions were there was to remind the rebellious population of how undefeatable Roman military power was. So when this Spirit says, "My name is Legion," what he's saying is, I am undefeatable. You can do nothing about this. The man in whom I reside is entirely at my mercy. No therapy, no rehab, no counsellor, no exorcism, no mumbo-jumbo, nothing can help this person. And so if I want to take him to a place of living death, that's the way it is, and there's nothing he or anyone else can do about him. That's what the word legion means. I cannot be shifted. And yet in verse 10, we read that this unshiftable entity begs Jesus not to send him away. Notice the contrast. Invincible evil begs at the feet of Jesus. And I wanted to highlight this contrast to you because it seems to me that the evils that would ruin our lives are similar to the evils in this story in that they often masquerade in a costume of invincibility. And as they send our lives on a downward trajectory, they give us the impression that they are too strong to resist. Whenever you ask a person, for example, who has tried and failed to fight his or her addictions, invariably they will speak of how hard it is to give up, how hard it is to resist, how hard it is to fight, and eventually in the conversation they'll always use the word powerless. I've tried and I've failed and I'm powerless. Similarly, during exorcisms, one often hears in the worst voices a phrase something to the effect of, "We will never leave. She will never be free." And our quote-unquote demons speak to us with a similar certainty and bluster. And to our fate we are often resigned. The urges are too strong, we say. The habits are too ingrained. The addictions are too alluring. What we face is invincible and we cannot overcome it. We are the way we are and we'll never change. And 2018 will be just the same as 2017. And any optimism we may have foolishly had on the 1st of January, it's already gone. We are the way we are. It is the way it is. What we face is invincible. And the Bible would say, yes, okay. The urges and the temptations and the habits and whatever it is has diminished and spoiled your life and does diminish and spoil your life is strong. Fair enough. But in this story we read that Jesus is stronger still. And because that is the case, turnaround is possible. Last week I suggested, did I not, that our self-limiting stories, our negative self-limiting stories, are in fact no more plausible than the alternatives. The fact is, it's just as easy for you to say that you can as it is for you to say that you can't. It's just as easy for you to say that you're interesting and worth getting to know as it is for you to say that you're boring. It's just as easy for you to say that it will work and you will find a way as it is for you to say that it won't work and you'll never find a way. Neither is more plausible than the other. Each of those are entirely rational statements. So why listen to the one over the other? Why listen to the self-limiting story in favour of the self-empowering story? Makes no sense. Too often in our lives, we listen to the wrong voice. And too often, that voice comes from within ourselves. So anyway, the evil legion in this story is concerned about having to vacate the geographical area. This raises questions. Why is this? Is it because evil is lazy? It seems to me that a lot of the things that would ruin our lives are lazy. Bad habits are lazy. Bad attitudes are lazy. Quite easy to fix, but we don't fix them. Easier to stay the way we are. Easier to stay where we are. Too much of an effort to change. Too much of an effort to move on to something better and bigger and more fulfilling. I'll just stay where I am. It's not that great, but I'll stay where I am. Don't know. Anyway, they're concerned about having to leave the immediate area. Then we're told that a herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." Vegans don't listen at this point. Jesus gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out, went into the pigs. Then the herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Now, in the Gospels, the exorcism stories, and there are many, they say something about the state of the world. Remember, this is the 1st century, and people believed that there was a connection between social, political, real-life events on earth and things that were happening in the supernatural world. And so when these people were subjugated by Roman legions in 63 BC, they naturally assumed that all of that subjugation was mirrored by something in the paranormal. And spirit possession was often a response to these real-life traumas. And so I mention that because the particular Roman legion that subjugated Palestine and the particular Roman legion that was stationed in nearby Syria was the Legio Fretensis. We have, next slide please. I can't turn around, I hurt my neck sleeping last night. Did you ever do that? Sleeping's dangerous. It's bad. Okay. So this is the, what is this? This is the seal of the 10th Legion. And here you have the words in Latin, Legion, the 10th Legion, and the F for Fretensis, that was his name. And underneath you have the Legion spirit animal. Each of the Roman legions had a spirit animal that they put on their banners and their flags and all that, and their shields. The spirit animal of the 10th Roman Legion stationed near Palestine was the wild pig. So whenever the 10th Legion marched into battle, its subjugated victims saw the image of the pig. So, when the original audience of this Bible story read this detail about a legion and pigs, they would have had a flicker of hope in their hearts. They would have thought, well, this is a story about Jesus beating evil. So maybe it's possible. Maybe the evil that so despoils us can be beaten as well. Maybe the strongest of our quote-unquote demons will one day be vanquished by the much stronger Jesus in whom we have faith. Maybe in this one strange exorcism, Jesus is serving notice on all of the things that so diminish and despoil our lives and sentence us to unhappiness and defeat and resignation. That would certainly have been the view of the original audience. Change is possible. Transformation is possible. There is no such thing as too strong, as too ingrained, as too defeated. These are not words that belong in the Christian vocabulary. Next sentence. We are told, sadly, that when the people of this village saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there and in his right mind. So this is like one of those before and after photos that they insist on showing you on your social media at this time of year. You know, here's the guy who didn't used to go to the gym, and here's what he looks like now. Well, only here it seems to be a mental health issue. Here's the guy, crazy guy, used to be, you know, living in a straitjacket, no friends, no good habits, horrible life, and now he is, notice the phrase, in his right mind. He looks different, he sounds different, he feels different. And you'd think, at seeing that, they'd be happy about it. It seems not. At the end of the sentence, look at their reaction. They were afraid. The word fear that they used there doesn't mean fear as in I've got to go to the dentist tomorrow and I'm scared about it. It means fear as in the curtain has been pulled back on the supernatural and I've had a glimpse into something I don't want to see, and I don't care if the results are good or positive. This is terrifying for me. And in their fear, we're then told that they asked Jesus to go away. They don't want any of this. I've got more to say on this, but I'll just skip to the end, I think. If there's any questions, you can ask them. Is this my tea? So here you have a story about a guy who has a miserable life, his life gets turned around, and his family and friends are uncomfortable about it. They don't like the transformation, and they ask Jesus to go away because of it. Have you noticed this in your own life? Do you notice that when you make a change and you try something, the people who never make a change and who never try anything are often the first to criticize you? This is because watching someone else totally go for it, totally pursue what they want to pursue and make the most of the only life they'll ever have, is very unsettling to the person who's spent a lifetime building a case for why they can't. one is no more plausible than the other. But choosing to move on to something better, to get rid of the things that hold you back and harm you, is threatening to people who can't be bothered and to believe the lazy lies of what the Bible would call evil. Any questions on any of that? Yes. The person in the story seems to have gone so far down a certain path that he didn't have any choices left. And do you agree that this can happen in life? You can get to a place in life where you make bad decision upon bad decision upon bad decision, and 2 years down the road, you've only got 4 choices left, and they're all bad ones. And then you go further down the road, and you've only got 2 choices left, and they're both bad. And you know, choices take us to a place of less and less good options, and either through his own fault, and that's possible, or just dumb luck, that's also possible. He seems to have been at a place where he couldn't do anything about his own life. I would imagine none of us are at that place. I would imagine that everyone in this room has the capacity to change habits, to make better decisions that will lead to a happier, better life. Is that a fair statement? And it's empowering to know that we have that ability. Just this week, our heads were spoiled by choosing certain thoughts. Our health was spoiled by choosing certain habits. And it's such a simple thing to say, not going to be like that anymore. Going to think different thoughts, going to do different things. That's astonishingly simple. But we persuade ourselves that it isn't, because often we just can't be bothered. Because as I said last Sunday, some of our self-limiting stories that we tell ourselves, although they limit our lives and keep us down, they actually give us a little bit of a perverse benefit as well. They give us the benefit of complaining, of whinging, of allowing people to feel sorry for us, and so on. It's quite simple to turn life around. You just need to choose better, and choosing better is just a matter of choosing better. If we can be bothered. Good question. Any other questions? Our Father, we admit that there are many things in our lives that we can't do anything about. We just can't. But we also confess in honesty that there are many things that we can. And so in prayer we focus on the areas of our lives that are ours to choose. And we ask for your help to choose better, that we might live better and do better as you would have us do. Part us with your blessing and your peace, we ask, through Christ our Lord. Amen.